All right, you ready?
Send it.
All right, welcome back to another episode of On Patrol. This is episode 18. And if you read the title, you know we're going to have an interview once again with another major industry leader, what we feel is an industry leader, another portion of the hobby space. But before we get into that interview, as always, we start with our alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. And this is where we cover anything from the last episode or anything, any excuses to why we've been late or haven't been posting as much on our projects like we said we would. So we had pretty good feedback from last episode, episode 17, when we did the interviews with about historical wargaming tournaments. We got a lot of feedback. It seems like really the only thing I got to add on from that episode was a lot of people came out very strongly in support of, hey, just give it a try if you're a historical wargamer, because it's a lot of fun. And the bottom line came down to, hey, it's a good excuse to get games in. And if you're really bent on, well, I like my matchups to be historical matchups, and it's like, well, there are plenty of event runners out there who will set up games to meet that niche. And that seemed to be like a lot of the feedback I got. Yeah, and then this episode, like most of our episodes, is coming out towards the end of the month, and because life tends to take its course. Kentuckian, you have any alibis, piggybacks for us?
Yeah, I think radio check, right? Can you hear me? Good to go. Um, I I I would say I concur with a lot of your sentiments on that episode. What we wanted to talk about is I know that people get almost polarized by competitive wargaming and those things, and it's in my mind it's a good entryway for people who aren't historically minded to kind of break into that, even if you're coming over from a game system. And there were some comments, where people were like, I liked Yorkshire Gamer's comment to me. He said, I thought about doing an episode on this, but I just didn't want to, record myself saying no for 4 hours. And
Yeah, I saw that.
Yorkshire, we got to have a debate on that or something. I might have to like a tag Italian Wars somehow in this episode just to get him to listen. But I'd like to, Ken, I'd like to talk to you more about it because I think there's a way to get people into it, and it's just not like it was in the olden days when you used to pick up Airfix and those things. And so spreading the hobby is taking on different entries. I mean, I grew up on this 1960s, 70s, 80s war movies, modeling. My dad, wargamer, and that was most people's who's our age or older, most people's kind of introduction into wargaming. And I just don't think that's the case anymore. I don't know if that avenue even exists. And so I think the information and 40K and the fantasy is a new avenue that, the more gamers we talk to, that's the more people coming over. So I find it hard to be, spreading the hobby unless you're somehow starting a conversation with those people. And I enjoy it because the same reason, that we talked about in the podcast is it's fun to be competitive and play against people. And I normally am not a win at all costs kind of person, but, I got things that can come out every once in a while. And it's fun to kind of go through that avenue, just as well as it's fun to play the specific battle and the specific, unit or whatever the case may be on that certain date and time group. So no big kind of pushes to the episode. I hope people kind of keep talking about it. And I'm really, as Windhurst said, I push it out to the group to just say, tell us what other avenues you've seen. In my mind, I think the two biggest ones to get into historical wargaming are from either competitive gamers crossover or the avenue that we talked about. And I just feel like the competitive gaming is almost it right now. I would say like 60-40, 70-30 maybe. I don't know. There's not a lot of people that I think grew up like me and Windhurst and a lot of the veteran wargamers out there. So really good episode. Really enjoyed the talk. Thanks to Peter and all those gents for Austin, all of them just getting on there. That was amazing. Can't thank them enough. But no, that's all I have. I'm really excited for this episode. Cory, we truly appreciate you being here today and taking the time to talk to us. You have a rich history in the war games hobby, and you're at the forefront at providing some of the most premier and affordable gaming mats on the market with dun 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 Cigar Box Battle Mats. The company Cigar Box Battle, I've done my cursory internet research, started in 2014, has over a decade of experience in providing customers with fantastic backdrops to fight some of the most famous, historical, exceptional, futuristic, or even creative battles and skirmishes. Most importantly, and especially for me, they are super inexpensive and dress up your table with the ease of flipping a bed sheet. I like that. Just for pennies on the dollar. After reading Cigar Box Battle's website, we know, Cory, that you kind of have started during elementary school. You played with your dad's 54 miller Britain's toy soldiers. I was never allowed to play with those. They stayed in the case, and if I touched them, I was about to get a whipping, as we say in Kentucky. You love military movies. I saw that on there, and you even convinced your parents, which that is a level of dedication to historical wargaming, to take you to Gettysburg for a summer vacation. That is super impressive. Don't anybody call Cory not a historical wargamer. So let's continue to pull on that thread before we get into the topics of Cigar Box Battle. One of the things that we want to do as we ask the audience to join us on this episode of On Patrol, and they grab their spear, their shield, their musket, or their belt-fed machine gun, is we want to know a little bit more kind of about you. And before we talk any about Cigar Box Battle that's overtaken the hobby world in my mind, I've been PCS'd all over the country. Rob's been all over the world. Although I didn't see any of your mats in Afghanistan, that's still maybe a market we can look to capture. But before we get into all of that, we wanted to kind of talk to you and let the audience meet you. So I'll turn it over to Rob to ask you the first question.
Cory, we just want to know more about how you got started in the wargaming hobby, where it started and transitioned, and whatever you feel like you can add.
So I just always have had a fascination with miniatures and, specifically military miniatures. I remember just playing with my dad's Britons. I still have them, actually.
That's awesome.
And he had a fort. And I would set up, Lincoln logs and play and throw, coins and Lincoln logs at the soldiers, and didn't really have any rules. But, that's kind of how it started. And that would have been in this, I'm older than you. That would have been probably in this late 70s, and then for anybody of my generation. So, I'm in my 50s. Dungeons and Dragons came around, right? So, that was a big explosion of miniatures and paints. At that point, you could buy anything and just about, you could buy miniatures and paints in hobby stores, toy stores. So kind of got into that, but then it started to, chainmail was around. We picked up the rule set chainmail and kind of modified it. It was the miniature, kind of a miniatures version. D&D really kind of came out of chainmail. So we played around with chainmail. We would just collect all of our D&D figures and fight these big battles. I remember one battle, we did a winter battle. I was a kid. My mom killed me. This was on the dinner table. And we wanted a winter battle. We put a white sheet and actually dumped bags of flour, 5-pound bags of flour onto the table.
That's terrain. That's taking terrain to a new level. I like that.
It looked amazing, because we got flour on the trees and the tops of the buildings, and it was great. But I was definitely, it was a late night with the vacuum cleaner. So. But that was kind of my, and then kind of got out of the fantasy when I got into college and started. There was a historical club. I went to Florida State, but in Tallahassee there was a gaming club, and I really got connected with those guys. And that club was some of the, and I'm still connected with those guys. That was one of my best kind of organized, gaming experiences. But that's kind of how I got into the hobby.
That's awesome. That's a good start. You kind of answered, I think, our second question was like, what was the game or thing that brought you into the hobby? Chainmail, D&D, and kind of just, again, every red-blooded American kind of grows up playing with army men, regardless of, whether the green and tan ones or whether they're the old Marx figures. I played with Marx figures, for a long time. I need to hide the box. I still do. But, another kind of question is, we always have somebody to Sherpa us. My dad, being where we're isolated in Appalachia there in Eastern Kentucky, was one that kind of Sherpa'd me early in the hobby. But who was the most, influential person in your kind of early hobby? You talked about getting into a club, but was there somebody who, like this is always your built-in opponent? You guys fought same armies, or somebody just taking you under the wing, whether a family member or club mate or just happenstance?
So his name was Bob Freeman. He's since passed away. He's older than me, but Bob was definitely my gaming mentor. He was, I met him in Tallahassee, and Bob would just do some crazy things. He was one of those guys. He would run games. The start time would be 6 a.m. Like it was Saturday morning. Like, if you want to come play, he was like, my kids got baseball later. So if you want to come, we're going to start the game at 6 a.m. I'll have coffee, show up at my house, be ready to roll dice. We'll be done by, noon, whatever, by 11.
Wow.
And out the door, and guys would show up. I mean, you would have people out of Bob's house. He ran such great games, and he was such a great game master, just a big personality. He'd watch you, he'd micromanage. And if he thought you moved, a millimeter too far, he'd say, all right, just order those troops, and, he ran the table with an iron fist, so to speak, but it was a lot of fun. He was also somebody that was just a great friend. I could go over to his house. If nothing was going on, you could literally knock on his door, and he'd always be in there painting, watching Zulu or some kind of movie, Zulu Dawn or just whatever, and just, hey, sit down, let's paint some figs. And we would have painting parties. He'd have guys over, and we'd just
that's awesome.
And order pizza. Bob was just a kind of the consummate gamer. We played originally. We played in buildings at FSU, and then it moved over to somebody's house after a couple of years. But I remember it was like, hey, we're going to start at 10 a.m. and we'll probably end about 10 p.m. It never ended that late, but he would always say, hey, because we would run these, the old style of gaming with these big epic, empire games. Right, or Johnny Reb, and it would take a long time to play him out. So we always would give it that long. It never did. Usually the battle, we'd end up with some argument, and the battle would wrap up by early afternoon. But those were some very memorable games. And Bob was definitely, I think he gave me some of my first pack of figures, right? And he trade with you, just whatever you wanted. He was just a great guy.
That's awesome. We all have those people that are so influential to us, and I think examples are great. I've patterned myself off a lot of people I've taken influence from, whether it be Howard Whitehouse, Bob Duncan, another person near and dear here to us in the Tennessee realm, or any of those people that just, I almost don't think they're war games. They're more of experiences, at the end of the day, we do enjoy it, privately, we were like, oh, the rules and stuff make sense. But when we go to these people's games, it is an experience in itself, and you're doing it with your friends. So it's a good, awesome time. I'm glad. I really think people should, I hope to be that to somebody one day, these giants whose backs we stand on. But those are amazing times. I'll let Windhurst ask this next question, and I know it's like a child, so Windhurst, I'll let you roll with it.
What is your favorite wargaming rule set, if you had to pick one? Also, if you have honorable mentions, if you really just have multiple, I know it's a hard question to answer, but if you could pick one, what would you say your favorite is?
You can give honorable mentions, like, hey, this one is,
So great question. So for me, it's probably Johnny Rep. So written by John Hill, right? John Hill wrote Squad Leader, kind of a famous war game designer. I knew John, personally as a friend, but he,
that's awesome.
He was definitely kind of a mentor to me. That was one of my biggest gaming experiences. He asked me to we ran a game together at NashCon one year. So, and actually John Hill was instrumental in the history of Cigar Box. I'll get into that a little bit later. But I'd say Johnny Rep, it's by today's standards, so it's probably not a game I'm going to introduce someone to gaming with now,
Yeah.
But for those people that like it, I think it just has, it's crunchy, but to me, it's realistic. It plays like what you read about Civil War battles, how the way they played out tactically. It's just a great, John Hill, I think, was really a genius game designer, and the game is just, there's a lot of layers to it, right? Again, so we actually have a Johnny Con as part of NashCon.
I was going to ask, how long has Johnny Con been going on? Ever since I've been to NashCon, almost, I feel like 2 decades plus, I've always heard of it being there.
Yeah. So it's been there since probably about 2014, maybe 10 years. So it used to move around. The concept of Johnny Con, the first one was in New Albany, Indiana. And then it would move cities. Different people would volunteer to kind of host it and book the hotel room. And then they would have Johnny Con 0.5s where, instead of, they would move it around during every 6 months. But what happened, Norris, who's a playtester, Norris Doral of Johnny Reb, but a good friend of John Hill's, they actually own a business together. He lives in the Nashville area now. So I said, hey, Norris, with you moving here, why don't we just move Johnny Con and make it just part of NashCon?
I mean, it's awesome. Yeah, the tables I went in this last one, like they're amazing. They normally do. I can't remember if it was 2 years ago, but with all the battle with all the trees that they had out there that were kind of bare. I cannot remember.
Yeah, I forget the name. It looked like a model terrain setup. It was amazing. Yeah,
it looked beautiful. That's any honorable mentions. I'll pose a little bit. Johnny Reb is a great game. I've played it with my dad growing up. But other games that are kind of like maybe honorable mentions in there.
So for Ancients, the rule set that I really enjoy, it's a little older too. It's a Artie Conliffe rule set, is Tactica. I really think Tactica is his masterpiece. I know he later did Armadi. He actually came out with the Tactica too, but I like it because they're big, massive armies. I mean, you're going to paint, they look like ancient armies, right? It's not DBA. I love DBA too, don't get me wrong, but what I like about DBA is campaigning in the day, right? That kind of thing. But Tactica, you want a big, massive ancient battle that kind of feels like an ancient battle. I think nothing beats Tactica.
I have Armadi and the rule sets, and me and my dad played Tactica a little bit. The one thing that I remember good about Tactica, which was kind of, I feel like ahead of its time, was Tactica had like its own supplement for sieges, is what I remember. And that was like stuff you couldn't use, like WRG, and those rule sets didn't really have like a way to do that. And they were just really, they did a lot of Knights stuff because that was pretty easy back in the day with resin. Like I can't remember if it was the old Glory cast or who did a lot of the resin castles and like old 25 millimeter. But yeah, Tactica, just like you said, you look at the pictures in those books, and even though they're significantly older, those pictures are awesome of just massive armies going at it. Tactica is good. Any other honorable mentions are kind of near and dear to your heart. It's like picking kids. I normally, everybody hedges and has like, this is my 5 greatest rule sets.
So this one might be a little controversial, not much, but Napoleon's battles. So we were playing Empire, and we rebased. It was a big deal, and we switched to Napoleon's battles. There it is. And you could play the big battles. We fought most of the big battles, right? I mean, starting with Marengo, in 1800, but we played all the way up to Waterloo. And just it was a great rule set for fighting the big battles, right? And it's controversial in that it's the rules aren't for everybody, right? At the level of command, they're not for everybody. But we had a great time with Napoleon battles, and we had a great time.
I love that rule set. My dad, I remember there used to be 2 things at Historicon. There was the game I always tried to play. I was like in high school at the time, was Midnight Madness with Fire and Fury. They would play it at like midnight. And if you sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, you get a +1, or Dixie, you get a +1 to your die roll. It's pretty cool. But then when I was a little bit younger, my dad would play with me in Napoleon's battles and just like beat the pants off me. And, it was a lot of hard lessons. But they used to run this game called like Before I Was a Marshal, or it was like an introduction to Napoleon's battles. And basically that would be my training. I would be like a Gatorade commercial all year, getting my ass kicked by my dad. Then I'd go there and whip up on some kids my age. A lot of fun. Got a lot of good memories with Napoleon's battles.
Yeah.
Any other alibis or anything else like that?
For air combat, I've always World War I's been my favorite, and I like Blue Max. It's it's a board game, but you can play it with miniatures. But I always just thought it was a simple and very elegant system. There's a campaign system in there, just a great, fun, kind of easy game to break out. That's something we'll break out still at conventions. It's a game I play with my kids. All my kids I've got 2 in college, 1 in high school. They're not really gamers per se, but they'll game. If I set something up, they'll play. They've grown up around it.
They're gracious with Dad. They'll be like, oh, we need allowance money. All right, let's play with old man.
Exactly. So they'll play. If I set something up, they'll play it. So that's something we do a lot of. A lot of Blue Max around the house.
You have said it's been really interesting with you. Like a lot of people will have, like guilty pleasures and things like that, but they'll keep to a lot of the same periods. I like that your group of wargaming rule sets is kind of eclectic. Like there's not a specific linkage, you know. And I know you enjoy history and all of those things. That's really interesting. I feel like me and Windhurst are kind of like that as well. We'll game anything, and as long as it's fun, and then diving into the history, that's part of the fun, is not knowing it and kind of, okay, what was going on at this time period. Yeah. Moving into kind of our next alibi question to that. And this is almost like picking your children again. Who's your favorite? What is Cory Ring's favorite period? I think it might be easy based off what you sent us as an email, 1864, knowing that you like Johnny Reb. I don't know. I've got a guess.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, Civil War definitely, right? Civil War definitely. But then I would generally say anything horse and musket. So that whole horse and musket period. Okay. So I'm sitting here in my gaming room, looking at collection. I've got, Battle of the Boyne over here. I've got early Napoleonic, 7 Years War, ACW. I'm starting probably my period next year will probably be 1866, right? Okay. Konigratz.
Okay.
So I think that's pretty interesting period, with the Dre's and needle gun versus the Lorentz rifle and different tactics. And it's, kind of the dawn of, it's after the Civil War. And my opinion, one side has learned a little bit from the Civil War, right? Trains and weaponry. And the other side really hasn't.
About to learn today.
Yeah. And, it's a fascinating period. So that might be my period next year.
That's awesome.
Horse and musket in general, I would say, is definitely my interest.
1800s, early, maybe 1900s, like a lot of, I assume there's a lot of kind of British colonial stuff in there as well. Anything, well, horse and musket, you do, that is such a wide, because you think about everything in Black Powder, that gives you a lot of leeway, to play battles on all amazing different continents.
Yeah.
Which is good.
I look at it from maybe around, kind of like War of Spanish Succession. I mean, generally speaking, for me, up to probably like Franco-Prussian.
Franco-Prussian, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would loosely define that. I think it's just that the combination of you have of mounted troops and skirmishers and weaponry and artillery, and it's usually the command, you're still commanding from the command from sight, right? It's not modern. So anyway, that's my favorite period. But I like everything. And I'm here looking at my collection. I've got, just like you guys, ancients. I've got some World War I. I'm looking at War of the Roses. I have a pretty big 28 millimeter War of the Roses army for Tactica Medieval, right? So, but one thing, again, back to Tactica, just ancients, and they came out with the medieval supplement. And like you said, there's siege rules, but also there's campaign rules. You can. The campaign rules are really for the wars in Italy, but you can modify those for just about anywhere. But just a great rule set.
That's the one thing that like kind of is missing in my mind with ancients. Is normally if you have an opponent, and I've played some of my buddies, like me and Windhurst have played the Carthaginians and Romans a few times, and I couldn't find like a decent supplement. I know the guys in Chicago with Little Wars, they did a really good one on the Pyrrhic. I bought Age of Hannibal Armies just for that campaign, but I found an old like Punic War classical campaign for DBA and DBM, and I'm trying to see if I can marry that up with Hail Caesar, which is I think a little bit more wider, the game I'd like to get out of it, and the audience the people that I've known that play those games. And I campaigns are a good way to like elevate ancients, so you're not playing the same, like you've got the different amount of points, what you're going to do and add to the force, and then over some periods. I've seen a bunch. I think Windhurst was showing me with he's got the Hastings, obviously, battle with his Normans and Saxons, and there's some really good, decent campaigns for that period. I think that elevates ancients, especially if you're going to play a few linked games with somebody.
I think if you talk to most gamers and they're honest, the campaigns are the best games, right? Now they do have to be run well, right? You have to keep them moving, and but we did we've used DBA for a lot of campaigns. We actually did an early Italian, so you've got
Sam Knights and stuff, and
Italian hill tribes and Romans. And that was cool. We did that in the club. We did a French and Indian War campaign. That was 30 years ago. People still talk about it.
That's awesome.
Probably 6 years ago, I ran an ACW campaign. It was basically Hood in Nashville, right?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And what was cool about that campaign is we did all the map moves blind. I was the referee. But then we had different gaming groups because we were all kind of scattered. Different gaming groups fight the battles out to give us the battle resolution. So we had guys in England, we had a guy in Australia, and they would kind of, I'd send them the scenarios, they play this, and that they kind of would give us the results for the campaign. So even the commanders weren't really, they weren't at the tabletop moving their figures. They had to just kind of deal with. They could provide some direction, like here are the orders, right, and this is what I want to happen. But that was a lot of fun. Those guys. That's 6 years ago, and they still, a lot of those guys are still friends. It's pretty cool, and they're all over the world. Just campaigns, I think, are the best way to go.
That's an awesome connection. I completely. That would be you've now put a bunch of ideas in my head, unfortunately, Cory. But in order to keep moving on, I'll let Rob pose the next question to you. Another kind of unfair question. You got to pick your child on this one.
What is your favorite individual miniature you've painted or unit that you have painted that you're always looking forward to get out onto the table, or that you just had the most enjoyment putting together and researching and painting up?
He's about to say a Henry V vignette, like he's just going to throw us a curveball here.
No, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball just because, I think, so ACW figures, I can paint them pretty quick because the uniforms aren't very, so there's actually a company called Schilling Figures out of Germany.
Never heard of it.
They're about to close shop. This is their last year. So if you want to buy any Schilling figures, you better get them this year. But they produce a range of 1806 Prussians, right, which is kind of rare. These are early Prussians and bicorns, right? So for me, Napoleonics, I like I collect two periods. I collect early bases, so like 1806, right? Bicorns, French, kind of the Austerlitz, 1805, 1806 to 7 period. And then in 25 millimeter, and then in 15 millimeter, I collect 1809, the Danube camp. But I would say some of those Prussian line units, I mean, they're just beautiful, right? With the lace and the buttons and the bicorns, and they were a joy to paint, but they just look great on the table, and the flags, and they definitely pop, right, compared to like an ACW unit.
So dirty, a lot of earth shade and washes over butternut and gray and blue.
I mean, I've been using that slap shop method lately, which is, if you're not familiar with it, you prime black, and then you dry brush gray, and then you dry brush white, and then I just, I'm basically putting a blue wash on the Federals, and then go back and kind of lighten up the pants, and same thing with the Confederates. I'm just using butternut or different grays. So, but these figures, they're, it's pants and a vest, and you've got a lot of trim, and you've got lace, a little bit of lace, and you've got pom-poms, and it's just, again, a lot more going on there. But
every figure is like a work of art, when you're talking like that. It makes me think of like those 7 Years' War armies too, on the continent. Like they're just man, I can't imagine the amount of research you've done with that too, to try to get it moderately historical, even if I like my research, but I will cut corners if my eyes start to bleed on something.
When I'm painting something, I'm kind of a stickler. So if it's 7 Years' War, I mean, if it's a gold button or a brass button, yeah, I'm not going to cheek anybody else, right? That's the difference.
Yeah.
I'm not, you paint how
personal,
however you want them, but I like doing the research as part of it. I would actually say I'm doing less gaming than I used to, just between, I knew it was going to happen, between family, my kids have got a lot of activities going on between football and how it is. Just, I mean,
we just started ballet, so I'm right behind you. I know my time is coming short.
But what hasn't taken a hit, because I can always find a way to create the time by getting up early or staying up late, is that the research part of the hobby, the reading, painting, that part's going strong. I'd say right now I'm probably lucky about once a month to meet up with some guys and do a game. Sometimes it's more frequent, sometimes it's less, but definitely. I've got a game set up. Well, almost. I'm waiting for my friend to bring over his forces. So this year's project is 30 Years' War. I'm doing the Catholic Imperialist Army, and my friend Titch he's doing the Swedish.
Heretics. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We're doing the Swedish phase, but we're gonna. I'm waiting for him to bring over his figures, and we're gonna set something up. And I'm writing some quick rules, right? Quick and easy convention style rules, and we're just gonna we're gonna go at it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. A great answer. I'm going to have to look up those models now just to see them. And you obviously did the thing that gets every war gamer, is there's a suspense on it. I mean, when Magistrin Militant did that, like our foreground, or anybody says we're closing shop, Aventine, who I get a lot of my ancients from, they were getting ready to sell, and apparently they've sold. But or they have a buyer. And so I was like, justifying a few $100s to my wife. Don't worry about that on the bill. Like, they're going out of business. This will be my last time.
Yeah.
But moving over to the next question, this one is, I think it speaks to you, you know, and your involvement in the hobby, and you're a kindred spirit with me and Windhurst here, because I think we get the same thing out of this. Another kind of unfair question, but what is the best war game you've ever played? Not just the rule set, but asking about the actual game, players, the table, the right amount of Cheeto dust on your hands, the laughs, the hoots. You know, playing the battles of Rorke's Drift early one morning at Historic Con, Agincourt at a big con with all the people. You know, it's somebody's basement. What is the best war game? You know, and I've heard more personal ones. I think, what was it? Charlie gave us, him and his brother, when they were getting into wargaming, played Lord of the Rings. Like, it was just so personal, and he kind of, when the fire started for him in wargaming, or the greatest experience. But what would be Cory's best war game ever played?
I mean, there's a lot, right? There's a lot, but I would say one that kind of always comes to my mind, and when I talk to some of the gamers, kind of, you know, from our gaming group in Tallahassee, kind of comes back. We played, so we usually hosted the games at John Olin's house, a friend of mine. But we had there's another friend. His name's, we called him Professor. He was a professor, but, you know, Dr. John Ryan. But he had kind of he had almost like, I call it a compound called Ryanwood, south of Tallahassee, down by the Natural Bridge battlefield, actually.
That's awesome.
You don't know about Natural Bridge, look it up. Great battle, great battlefield, good reenactment every year. But he lived right near there. But he invited us down. He told us, you know, prepare to spend all day here. Even prepare to spend the night, right? Just bring a change of clothes, you know, bring a deodorant. And we did that. So it was when we got down there early morning, mid-morning, you know, had some coffee. And he had set up we had done some planning and campaign moves before the game. You know, he gave us a map. So this was an Ancients game. It was a Romans versus, I think, Germanic barbarians. Yeah. But there was some off-board movement involved, little, you know, some campaign element. Where you want to kind of swing to the south or kind of to the west. There was a fort, a smaller fort, but there was a lot of planning involved. But we spent the whole day out there moving these troops. We actually used DBA. I mean, kind of a modified DBA, like a big battle DBA. But, you know, there were siege elements and armies moving in, and there were people retreating, and, you know, and we took a big break for lunch, right? So we had a big barbecue. You know, he had a pool. Some guys even, you know, we took just, hey guys, we're gonna take an hour. We're gonna grill up some, you know, bratwursts and stuff. And if you want to hit the pool, and then, you know, we started drinking beer, and next thing you know, it's like midnight, you know, and some guys are going home, and some are spending the night. You know, one guy, Patrick Schuler, he brewed mead, right? So he had this.
Oh, nice.
And his mead was probably a little on the strong side. Right. So if you had a couple of those, I mean, you were definitely spending the night at Professor's house. But that's a game people still talk about, you know.
That's awesome.
And
how many figures in that? What I just imagine.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're talking about a couple tactical armies being used for DBA. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So lots of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of little stands, you know, so it was a big, you know, a huge battle, right?
That has everything I've ever dreamed about. That's awesome. That sounds awesome. Especially with alcohol involved, as long as, you know, it definitely has the ability to highlight a game and microscope some behaviors that are sometimes pretty comical. But I'll let Windhurst take over to the next one.
So, Cory, we're interested in how you made the transition from a hobbyist into a business. What led to that decision, and what was the motivation behind all that? Did it just start as something that you're interested in and other people caught on to it, or, you know, what was the catalyst?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, the whole cigar box battle, you know, battle mats have been around. Remember, Games Workshop made mats. When I was a kid, I would go to the railroad store and buy those big green mats, right, and roll those out. You know, you couldn't really put hills under them. But actually, some of the concept for cigar box came from Bob Freeman, my gaming mentor. What he would do is he would go and buy these big canvases or sheets of cloth and actually hand paint battles on them. So he would have Chickamauga on there. He have different ACW scenarios for Johnny Rep. The concept was he could go to the university, throw that mat down, and it had roads on it, rivers, it had the wood lawns all painted. And Bob was no artist, don't get me wrong. These things were pretty ugly, but I mean, they were basic, right? Blue for rivers and a brown for a road. But once he threw lichen on there and trees and put some fences down and buildings, it really looked good. And the setup was so fast, right? And so that was kind of the original concept of Cigar Box, was what Bob was doing. And what actually, it's funny you mentioned Howard Whitehouse earlier. I had Howard Whitehouse do kind of the first mock-up of a Cigar Box Battle Mat. This was a long time ago. It predates Cigar Box, but I said, hey, can you do this? I want this on a big piece of felt with roads and fields. And he did it. I still have it. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like the Cigar Box Battle,
prototype.
Yeah. And then, back to John Hill. So John asked me to run a Shiloh game using his new rules across the Deadly Field at NashCon. And it was part of Shiloh, kind of Sarah Bell's Cotton Field, that part of the battle, be the Union left flank, if that makes sense, at Shiloh on the first day.
Yep.
And he had art done already for a board game. This board game was never published, but John actually was commissioned to write a board game for Shiloh by Pacific Rim Publishing. They never published it. They paid him, never published it, but he had this artwork, and he basically sent me this artwork, and I had it printed on a piece of fabric, right, with the concept. Just, okay, and then we're going to use this as the mat, right? And but seeing people's reaction to it, we were like, this could be an interesting idea, right? But anyway, John Hill suggested that we do it, or he encouraged us, I guess you'd say, hey, what you got? This is a great idea. You guys should do it. So anyway, that's kind of how Cigar Box started.
So it sounds like it really was you made this for yourselves, and the reaction from the public was so good that you thought, well, hey, why not just sell these?
Yeah, that's exactly. And then the intention was, well, hey, maybe we can just, sell a few of these mats to pay for some miniatures or some dice, cover some hobby expenses. And it kind of still is that way. It's not, it's a part-time thing. We don't make our living off Cigar Box, but it definitely helps cover some of the hobby expense.
No, it's awesome. I would say it's extremely impressive, and to see you guys, come from 10 years and be on, because you obviously you have a entrenched part, I think, in the Nashville area, and I've always gravitated towards NashCon, just being in Kentucky, and even when I've been stationed other places. I think the first time I was at Bragg, I came back to NashCon. Always have fond memories down here, and Wargamers Reunion and some of the other shows I would always kind of go to. Really, really kind of interesting to see it grow. I would ask this: it was every kind of business that we've talked to, whether it be miniature manufacturers, terrain, or battle mats like yourself. One of the things that somebody says, it comes from the passion, and we've said you normally don't try to be Scrooge McDuck just counting your money in anything in the wargaming, unless your Games Workshop. Everybody else is kind of just, hey, this is kind of cool. I think it's cool. Do you guys want to think it's cool too? And give me a couple bucks to minimize my hobby, minimize the expenses. What is one of the things, we always pose this to people who'd gotten in the business side. What is one of the kind of unanticipated lessons learned about getting into the business side of the hobby, and coming from a lifelong kind of war gamer and passion side of it?
So, it's not a major surprise, but, it's a business, right? So I remember, the first year it's like, oh, okay, you got to, you have quarterly taxes you got to pay, and you have annual taxes you got to pay. And Tennessee Department of Revenue, I interact with them a lot, and we're based in Nashville. I have since moved to Atlanta, but my partner Chris is still in Nashville, so we're still a Nashville-based company. And I'm in Nashville a lot. I still have a lot of great friends up there. I lived in Franklin. Just if you're Civil War, fan, about Franklin. If not, it's a suburb south of Nashville. But that's where I lived for about 17 years. And but I'd say, just it's a business, right? So you have to run it like a business. There's there's just a lot of work to be done on the side. And then, I would say my conventions now are a lot different. Some conventions I go to just to game and have fun, but now some conventions can be exhausting, because during the day I'm working the vendor booth, right? I'm not doing any gaming, And then it's like close the vendor booth, go to dinner. And then if I'm lucky, I can do the night session, right? That 8 to midnight NashCon. So usually what it is like set up in the morning, work all day. You know, I mean, that the lunch is like run in the lobby and grab a hamburger, right? You know, kind of
$30 hamburger. Yeah.
Grab
Yeah.
30, well, you get a bag of chips for that. $30.
Yeah.
But yeah, you eat, you know, and the hamburger's not great, you know that. So, and then run in and you're just, you know, interacting with people all day, and that's fun. But you're not, you know, I'm not gaming. It's like working a job, you know. It is a job, and but it's fun. It's rewarding. I like it. And then we you know, run the dinner. Usually we do a lot of, and you guys are welcome to come with us here at NashCon. I call it, we do a lot of industry insider things. We usually go to the Bavarian Beer Garden over at the mall.
Yeah.
We'll have battlefield terrain concepts, miniature building authority, Discover Games. Most of these people are from Atlanta, oddly enough, which I thought about starting an Atlanta convention.
You need to do it, Cory. You need,
But well, what COVID kind of kicked in when I was thinking about doing it, but now I think you know, the grass might be a little more fertile to start a convention here.
You have such a good community down there, Cory, and I know you had one here in Tennessee, and you know, you being a shepherd, Sherpa of it. That's another episode. I look forward to talking that one about you, and you know, maybe we're advertising it when you get to that level. But yeah, I agree that the tends to fall right. That economic principle of there's no such thing as a free lunch, and a lot of people do say that about the business side. You know, kind of an unanticipated lesson is we've got taxes, we've got other things due, overhead. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of people do have their hands for handouts and things like that. And are they being good stewards of advertisement, stuff like that? I myself, I have to be candid, you know, obviously Cory's hooked up tournaments I've ran in the past with giving away great mats. So I know that you get plugged in a lot of different directions. And again, you're, like you said, you're not rolling in money for Cigar Box, but it's great. And you can tell your passion, and you can tell you kind of fight through. I'm sure you have other adversity when going through that business, and you fight through that, and you're still spreading the joy of the hobby. I'll kick it back over to Windhurst for the next question.
Of course, so something we always like to ask industry leaders whenever we have them on the channel is, how do you feel like the hobby is going, the community? Is it growing? Is it petering out? Is it graying, as people say? Is it alive and doing well? Kind of like, what are your thoughts on the overall health and direction of the wargaming community and hobby as a whole? And any other thoughts you might have along those lines?
You know, I'm a big believer in you just got to kind of be in the moment, right? You know, and I think at NashCon, it's alive. Now, there's in NashCon, it's definitely not graying. I mean, it is graying. So the Bob Duncan, you know, I was friends with Bob Duncan, you know, and some of these guys have passed on, you know, Bob Freeman, but, you know, NashCon was filled with younger gamers. Now, they're not gaming Empire or Johnny Reb or Napoleon's Battle, right? They're gaming Kings of War. They're gaming, you know, Middle Earth. They're gaming Age of Sigmar, right? But my thought is, I mean, I'm a historical gamer at heart, but as long as you're a brother, if you're rolling dice and you've got terrain and you've got miniatures and you're painting, you know, we're in the same hobby. So I think it's, you know, I think the hobby's very healthy. I just think it's, you know, kind of, you know, just changing, things evolve, right? I think you're seeing a lot of change there. I think 3D printing's a game changer for the hobby. I think MDF is a game changer for the hobby. I think, you know, contrast paints have been a game changer for me.
Yeah,
right? There's
same.
a lot of great changes out there. You know, but I think the hobby's fine. You know, I think every year is just better. You know, every year is in, you know, everybody's like, oh, the golden age of gaming was the 80s, and then it was the 90s, and it was early. I mean, it's definitely now. I think, you know, whatever you want is out there. When I started, if you wanted certain armies, they just weren't available, or you would definitely, or certain units, you'd have to convert figures. You know, I mean, I remember doing that stuff. I mean, chopping off heads and gluing on heads and gluing on epaulets and. Or just crazy stuff, backpacks, and you know, you don't have to do any of that. Or much now, if you're doing it because you like it, right? Or you just kind of choose to do it. But I think the hobby's very healthy.
We talked about this, and I believe I have a hypothesis of the change, and I think I was on the tail end of the prototype wargamer from 50s, 60s and beyond to 80s and 90s and early 2000s maybe is when I think it didn't transition. But you used to, most people that we've interviewed, you listen to interviews and you talk to people in the hobby, they all have pretty similar trajectory. Comes from a love of military history, comes from either, modeling, airfix, whatever it is that you can get your hands on. And then you kind of discover wargaming like, hey, this is fun. I used to play this with little army men on the foot of my bed, and now I'm, it adds to the passion. I just don't see that as the prototype, like archetype for wargamers anymore. And it was me and Yorkshire Gamer kind of had a disagreement via message on Facebook. And so the sense of is one of our last episodes was competitive wargaming and / historical wargaming. And a lot of, I think, people entrenched in historical wargaming, bat their eyes at it and are just like, this is not something I'm not, this is, people go for meta, people are out there for all different variety of reasons. But I don't believe you're going to see people grown like they were in the past from watching the 60s, 70s Patton movie and then being like, I want to play this on the tabletop. I think we're getting a lot of people from, competitive fantasy and sci-fi wargaming. I feel like they're coming in droves. And I noticed, just to your point at NashCon, there's this huge Age of Sigmar tournament that's going on. I think it was over 100 people. I'm not really sure, Cory. But those people started walking around, started playing in pickup games, started looking at other booths, whether it be Cigar Box or whatever. I think there's a way that us who are entrenched in historical wargaming, can kind of pick those people up and show them, hey, that you just lost that competitive sci-fi war game before you even rolled your dice because this rule book's broken or whatever. Why don't you just play Waterloo with us over here, or play, Bagration or whatever the case may be, and we're just having fun. Nobody's going to get too. There's some rules lawyers out there and some ne'er-do-wells in every wargaming community, but I think that's a way that we capture these people. I don't know. I'm sure in Atlanta, the wargaming scene's alive and healthy. How do you feel, for whatever activity you have left in your club, or if you do demo games? I know, what is the name of that game store that's huge down there? Massive.
There's Level Up Games.
Level Up Games.
It's in Duluth. It's massive. I don't know what it used to be in, but it's huge. It's the biggest gaming store I've ever been in. I mean, so if you're ever in Atlanta and you're in the Duluth area, there's actually 4 or 5 Level Up Games. The others are small, normal retail operations. But the one in Duluth over near the old Gwinnett Place Mall is massive. You walk in, they've got retro pinball machines. They've got a big board game. Yeah, they've got card game. I mean, they've got everything you want. Not a lot of historicals. I think the only historicals they do have a little bit of Bolt Action and I think some Team Yankee. But a lot of paint. I mean, a lot of tools, terrain. They've got all the rest of that.
It would be any observations that you have on that. Like, what do you think is for people that you see coming to historical war games, what do you think is the gateway in your observations from kind of your foxhole?
I think it's the Games Workshop model, right? So they're playing Games Workshop games, and then, Warlord Games, who's basically a bunch of ex-Games Workshop guys, they hop into Bolt Action, right? Or they hop into, I think Warlord Games, and I know, Matt, that you're definitely kind of, an advocate of Warlord Games, but I think they're great at conventions of, hey, come on over here and play this game, or why don't you try this, right? So I think that model really works, and they can hop right into it, right? The rule books, they have boxes where you can buy the box, you have everything you need to play. I think Warlord Games is really the answer there.
They're a good gateway drug. They normally, myself included, I know I'm a big fanboy, but myself included, they sometimes lack the depth that that everybody kind of the historical wargamers grew up on, whether it be Fire and Fury. You said Empire, like Warlord Games wouldn't even get close to touching that level of detail in games. But it's good, right? It's a gateway drug in my mind. And if you get somebody interested in talking about the period, that's a good hook to it. I look forward to the future, like you said, and I do concur. I think Windhurst would probably agree with you. It is always a golden age of gaming. It's going to transform. It's going to change. How are people coming in? What are they playing? And those things. But at the end of the day, it was a tenet kind of some of your answers here. Getting around a table, having laughs, rolling dice with people, and having kind of fun. And so a great introduction to kind of meet Cory and the amount of time that we did. We will shift now to Cigar Box. We talked about the entry to Cigar Box. We talked about, you know, where you started and the prototype map. Again, I'm a Cigar Box fanboy. I already to Rob before we came on the air. I said, you know, I want the listener, viewer, or whatever to understand that. In my mind, I have played and I have owned every mat there's known to man, mainly because I'm an impulse buyer like most wargamers, and I will purchase those things. I don't think you will find a better product out there on the market besides a Cigar Box Battle Mat. And I feel so strongly about this is because first answer is I'm cheap. And so cheapness, I hate to start on that, but it is, I'm cheap. I can get a mat, any of your generic mats and those things, less than $100, way below neoprene, way below some of your competitors out there. And the ones that it's not below, I'll be honest, their quality in my mind is kind of subpar. And I can get this mat. If there is one thing that is going to change this gaming table behind me in an instant, it is that mat. You can't lay down. I really love Battlefield Terrain Concepts, and to give our boy Doug a shout out, Cory. His trees, super expensive, love them. I still have loads of them. I'll buy them day in and day out. Not every wargamer will do that, but it can change a table. But you need a bunch of trees. You need a building. You need a different manufacturer over here. But the one thing that you see on the entire table is that mat. And for me, somebody that loves playing generic scenarios, somebody that loves playing pitch battles, and somebody that runs events, you know, I need 20 or 30 tables. Right? I think in North Carolina, I got up to like high 38 was the biggest tournament I've held, and 15 to 20 of your tables, 15 tables, about 30, over half of the tables were Cigar Box Battle. It is, you know, the best answer. And then I need to quit singing your praises so we can go into these discussion points, but I just think I highly recommend it to people for the very reason of you won't find your better bang for your buck to transform your tabletop into something, you know, this distant land with the frozen tundra, or your Sicily map. Now I'm in Italy, or wherever the case may be, in an instant, like that map, like that. I mean, who wants to put together a building? Who wants to paint this tree? Who wants to put together this brushwork and all that stuff? Those things are great. They do add the little, you know, stuff to your tabletop that can put it ahead. But for the combat multiplier that mat is, it's not even close in my mind. And so I wanted to do an intro with that. And so we talked a little bit, and we sent you some topics, kind of why battle mats. I feel like you answered a good part of that earlier with the stripping the map and kind of doing it for your guys' self and everything else. What has kind of you stick with mats? I've seen them grow and go through, you know, you've had Kickstarters, you've had other things like that. What does the mat mean to you, you know, and why did you pick that as well?
I mean, you know, we kind of was selfish, and then we kind of started just for our own purposes, if that makes sense. You know, hey, I want a mat I can, because you know, I've been like most gamers, I went down a lot of different roads, right? So you know, the big styrofoam tiles, and those were great. They can look really good, but once you store them, put them in your attic for a couple of years, you know, they would get dinged up, and they're not easy to store and travel. Nothing against it; they look great, but I wanted something I could throw in a backpack and take down and level up games, you know, or take over to Bob Duncan's place, you know, or take to National, throw it on a tape, you know, throw some geohex down. I mean, or just wad up a t-shirt or a towel, right, and put it down and throw the mat over it. And I mean, you're literally just setting up in minutes. You know, people kind of thought we were crazy for doing mats with roads and things like, oh, we'll do our own. I mean, but those are some of our best sellers. I think that's the epitome of it, is you just throw it down and you have a generic battle, and there's a road and it runs over a hill, and you throw some buildings down and some trees, and, you know, throw a pond on there, and you're fighting a great battle, but you can set up literally within minutes. You know, I know when I go to run games at conventions, my setup time has been really reduced from what it used to be, you know, hauling in tiles and things like that. So that's kind of what we started. You know, we like to say you can travel light, and they store easy. Nothing against neoprene, but, you know, they roll up, and I've had neoprene mats. They roll up in these big tubes, and I've noticed over time they don't age well. They're like my mouse pad here. I'm looking at my mouse pad. You know, the corners are starting to roll up, and they just don't age very well. So, these age much better. You can wash them. Basically the concept there, it's almost like a big fleece blanket. If you're not familiar with Cigar Box Battle Mats, and you can put terrain down, you can throw the mat over, and like I said, the mat can store in probably a shoebox. If you really scrunched it up, and they
Easily,
don't wrinkle. Yeah, you can kind of smooth it out with your hand. Like I said, when your buddy spills a Coke on it, they're washable. I got Matt Rendar sent me a message. Hey, I just got some dirt on one of my mats. Can I wash it? Absolutely. So that was kind of the concept, was, just travel easy and fast setup for conventions and club games, where you don't have, a lot of conventions when you're running a game, you might have an hour to set your game up, right? You don't have, 6 hours like you do at home or a weekend. So that was kind of that was the original concept. And then just, the original mats that came out were really just scenarios I wanted. A part of them were like Aspirin Essling, for the Napoleonic Wars, Chickamauga, and then kind of just grew from there. And we even did a San Juan Hill mat. We sell it now as kind of a tropical mat, but a lot of them were just, hey, I want to run this battle. And we still do that, like Trenton and some of these, Germantown, some of these new mats we're coming out with. They're just things that I want to do. And we have the designer do them, and I don't expect it to be great sellers, but we sell a couple of them and people love it. It's definitely worth it. So our best selling mat's actually just the base, like a grassland mat, right? There's no design on it, but close behind are some of the mats with roads, the ones that have roads and fields on them. So that was the core concept.
I'll kick it back to Rob to ask. Rob, whichever topic you think fits in or ties into that, because we've got a few topics we kind of wanted to hit on you with.
Yeah, thanks, Kentuckian. So, just kind of looking at what the overall strategy or goal of the company, have you felt like since its inception it's changed? Do you feel like you're going a certain direction? You talked about lessons learned as trying to run this as a company based off it just starting with, well, this is something we're making that we like and other people like it. Can you elaborate any on that?
So we try to stay focused on our core business, which is just 6x4 police battle mats, right? We do have some other things, and a lot of it is we do listen to customers like, hey, we're interested in doing this. So we actually haven't promoted them a lot recently, but we have these double-sided 3x3 vinyl mats. That's a new material for us. Yeah, so they roll up, but those are more targeted toward like skirmish games and role players. You can throw it out. We can print hexes or grids on anything, but a lot of like the D&D 5th edition players, they want something that's 3x3. They want to have, a dungeon floor on one side and ice on the other side or whatever. And they want to have a 1-inch grid on it. And we can, so we've done some things that we think people will like, but we've done double-sided mats. We've done slightly smaller mats. We did instead of a 6x4, they were like it was like a 5x4, not a big difference, but just, again, it's slightly smaller mat. We've just done some different things. Now we have large mats. So we have these 6.5 feet by 15 feet mats. So our Gettysburg mat and Waterloo mat were that size. Actually, that mat, the Gettysburg mat was basically designed to work with the Brigade Fire and Fury. So you could fight the whole Battle of Gettysburg, right, all 3 days on a 6.5 by 15 foot mat. It's designed at that scale, and Waterloo kind of the same way. But now we've got some larger. We've had a lot of requests for that, like, hey, my gaming table is this size. Now, unfortunately, we can't do every single size. I get a lot of those. Hey, my gaming table is whatever this size. So we can't do that. But we've tried some other things. We've done again 3x3 mats, cloth, single-sided, double-sided, but our core business really is what we want to stick to is that 6x4 mat. And they're actually a little larger than 6x4. We call them 6x4, but they have overhang. The concept is if you put some terrain down, you have some elevation, and you have a 6x4 board, you throw it on top, there'll be some overhang, a few inches of overhang. So it's not exactly 6x4. That's what we call them 6x4 plus.
They're perfect. I love that fact of it. I heard you, even though you're staying true to kind of the personal reasons why you did this and the battles that you want to set, you're like, hey, I don't really give a crap how many this sells, but kind of what I wanted to do, and if it sells, it sells. What about you do? It seems like you do some customization. You're listening to people, like you want to be a good steward of the hobby, and if there's something that somebody else is getting into, it seems like you're doing that. I've noticed the different sizes. I can't remember. I looked at it. I wrote it in my notes. I can't read my own handwriting. I know Waterloo and Gettysburg were pretty substantial. 15 foot is what you said, I believe, or
Yeah.
it's 15 foot. Do you make, you can really make all sizes depending. You don't go like some of the customization will get really crazy. I don't know if I saw it on the website. Was there an 8-foot map or no? I can't remember.
No, it's just our 6x4, but the 6x4 is actually closer to a 5x7. We've
Yeah.
also had a lot of success. People have told us they'll take 2 mats to like a professional, someone that does alterations. And they can stitch them and it looks perfect, right? I don't mind. Actually, I just overlay mine, and it looks fine, right? So, and if you're really kind of clever with it, a lot of the overlay, that's where a road will go or a hedge or some woods. You can really make the table kind of blend it all together. But yeah, that's our. We get a lot of requests for different sizes, but we really like to stay focused on just 2 sizes right now. It's 3. I'd say it's the 3x3 double-sided vinyl for skirmish games and role-playing games, the 6x4, right, which is what most people want. And then we call them our epic scale mats, right? So the 6.5 feet by 15 feet. That's kind of the 3 big product lines.
The scales that you do. The rolling into our kind of next topic on Cigar Box Battle is you talked a little bit about kind of your sellers. And I know if anybody should go to your site now and kind of look through it. It's amazing. And I'll be honest, even if you're in most wargaming groups, the groups that all I see is you'll see you if you don't know about Cigar Box Battle Mat and you're a wargaming enthusiast or you play at a club, you've probably seen a mat. They're just all over the place. I think I was in a Muskets and Tomahawk group. I see it. I was in a Blood Red Skies group, and I see your guys' sky, from the Earth's crust to the highest stratosphere here. You've got space mats. You're all over the place. Your best seller, you would kind of talk about your generic versus specific battle mat. I'm kind of curious, what is the best seller mat for you overall?
So if you go to our website, it's called 410. It's like the grassland too. It's kind of it's a grassland that has a little bit of fall color in it, some browns and things like that. That's the #1 bestseller. And then it's funny, things will just be hot or not. So we'll go through you'll see it like, for example, with Blood and Plunder, all of a sudden, a lot of sea and island mats started selling, right? A bunch of orders will come in. It just kind of shifts. And then we'll go through a month or two where winter mats, right? Everybody's doing some kind of snow game, where, Battle of the Bulge, and so it's kind of, on my end, it's kind of fun to see these trends, right? Where I'll see
whatever the new rule set is out. Boom, boom, boom.
It's like Battle of the Bulge, our dens. And then, something else will come out, and a lot of it has to do with what, whatever, honestly, probably Warlord Games or some of the big companies are producing. If they're putting out the North Africa starter set, it's like desert mat. And then if it's, something in the jungle, it's a jungle mat. It's kind of, for me, it's kind of fun to see that, trends in gaming and,
Yeah, you get it. You're on the like Wall Street bottom floor. You get to see this is where we're going. This is where this is the next hotness. What is just a callback to one of our other questions as well? What is your favorite mat? That Cigar Box Battle. You can't pick a prototype. It's got to be one that you guys have churned out. But what is probably one of your favorite mats that you guys produce?
I like the island mat. You've probably seen it before, but it's basically great for pirate games. I've seen a lot of creative things. Ghost Archipelago. It's just such a cool mat. You throw it on there. You throw some buildings on top or a tower. It could be used for fantasy. Again, pirates. It could be used for World War II in the Pacific. I just think that's a cool mat. The island. Yeah, that's probably, and then probably the epic size Gettysburg. I've seen some pictures. I have yet to run an epic size Gettysburg game, but I've got some pictures, and there's some guys just doing some really cool stuff. And that's the other thing that's kind of fun with Cigar Box is looking at all the cool stuff people are doing with the mats, right? Some people have taken the mats to levels I could have never imagined.
The island mat, I've seen a lot of good, like you said, they'll be people that will put foam or whatever under your mat to make the undulations. And then I've seen people put like real rock and gravel, and it just blends in. And you're like, man, this is, you think this would be one of the old Howard Whitehouse boards of all his like Mahdi and Sudan games. It looks really cool. And you're like, man, that's just Cigar Box Battle Mat. And they've a little bit of flair, and it's beyond, what would take you months probably to build in your garage. The guy in Arizona is probably one of the best beaters of the drum for you. He does the both. He plays, I think, the old rule sets that I play, the Brigade Fire and Fury and Age of Eagles, and I think he uses your guys' epic battle mats, and he's always got lovely figures. I can't remember. I think he's out of Tucson.
Yeah,
that guy is
Jeff Cohen, I think, is his name. And
yeah, he is crushing it. Those mats look beautiful.
He has some of his his naval games look amazing, right? His everything he does just looks great. Yeah. So
I don't know when he paints them. I want to see progress photos, because just next thing I know, he's like, he did the Epic Hail Caesar. He started battling it, and he has like a bunch of divisions already now.
Yeah, he's got to be a prolific painter. He's probably up all night painting. Because same thing, you're looking at it and there's nothing. Then all of a sudden he's putting these armies on the tabletop. So must be a super prolific painter. Yeah.
Crazy. I'll kick it back to Windhurst. We got another I'm going to be very, very vocal on this next topic, but go ahead, Windhurst. Kick it back to Cory.
All right, I'm actually going to skip ahead, Kentuckian, so you can take on that one. But when I first looked at battle mats, because I'm fairly new to using battle mats that weren't homemade, just probably within the last 5 or 6 years, I know early on the big problem was the level of detail. They weren't very detailed, or it was very obviously like a cut and paste texture, and you could see that textured pattern throughout the whole mat. So I'm just curious, how you all decide on what level of detail. I know you got 2 different scales, how you go about, getting to that end product with that correct level of detail, not making it look like it's just a copy and pasted battle mat.
Yeah, so I kind of wish Chris was on the call. Chris designed a lot of the early mats, and again, he's a graphic designer by trade. Now we actually use a couple different designers, that kind of we just they're like freelancers basically. I mean, we have a few that are kind of in pocket, so that's why kind of the unique look of some of our mats. So you're not really seeing them designing for anybody else, but it's very detailed. I mean, I remember where Chris will use a lot of like photo imagery to start with. And we were doing a desert mat, and he was looking. I mean, he'll start with he'd take a picture and kind of rework it, right, and turn it into art, if that makes sense. But when we were looking at the art, and there was a cigarette butt in one of the images. I mean, super tiny. We're like, yeah, that's got to go. So I mean, it's he spends a lot of time on this, and a lot of just a lot of original artwork, or again, just kind of taking photographs, and we work a lot of the historical maps that way. He'll take a historical image, a historical map, right, from let's say the ACW. So we have a Battle of Nashville map. I mean, that usually starts with a historical map, and then he turns it into art, kind of, so paints over it and so forth. But we don't want to go into too much detail is also not great. I mean, these, our mats are printed at a high DPI, but you don't need a ton of detail, but you don't want too little either. Too little, it looks blurry. Too much, it can become kind of oversaturated, or a little too busy, So we try to go with what we call an artistic look. It's like miniatures in a way. I mean, you could overpaint a miniature, but you could put a lot of detail on it. But when you're standing, 3 feet, 4 feet away from a table, that's kind of the look we want. We always like to describe it as you're in an airplane and you're looking down, and that's about the level of detail that we like. Not too much, not too little. Kind of, again, that model train, kind of look, right? Maybe at a HO scale, or maybe a I would say, what is it, N scale, 10 millimeter, but that's kind of look we're going for. So not too much, not too little. That makes sense.
The great answers, Cory. The pushing it over to call back to our other topic is the cost versus rival companies. I said a little bit of that when we were introducing you. One of the things that I want to get at is, what do you think Cigar Box Battle, and I'm kind of merging this question, does differently than your competitors? Whether if you think cost is in there, detail, with everything on the market right now, what do you guys think stands out that you guys do?
Well, we were the first to really do this type of mat. Like I said, there, Games Workshop had a mat, and there were always the model train mats, but we were really the first that were print roads and fields on a mat, or do historical scenarios on a mat. I think our quality's top notch. I'd put that's one thing we've never, tried to cut corners on, is the quality, right? So, that keeps the price up there. Unfortunately, we used to have a UK distributor, Windhurst, but COVID, the costs in printing just went up, skyrocketed I mean, just try to get something printed these days, you know. So we basically it ate up the margin of it. North Star UK used to import our mats to the UK. COVID, you know, again, the increases post COVID kind of killed that. But you know, it's just kind of you know, although I wish we had a UK importer again. I don't want to go down a dirt road here, but you know, we just try to make a quality product at a fair price. I think we try to be you know, creative and introduce some new mat designs and maybe take some risks, right? You know, and we're at a point now since we're not trying to make a living off Cigar Box, right? But you know, so if something doesn't work out well, it's okay. I mean, it just goes into the catalog. So we can take some risks with some designs and do some what I would consider some stuff that maybe our competitors wouldn't do. And you know, I think our you know, I'm not going to mention any by name, but there've been quite a few, I call them copycat, people pop up, and that's fine. It's just like hamburgers, right? I mean, you can get a great hamburger a lot of places, right? There's, you know, so, you know, who's going to have a better mousetrap, so to speak. So the competition's a good thing. We just, like I said, we'd like to say focus on our core product. I would also add too that our customer service, we kind of pride ourselves on that. Like if you email us or message us, you're going to get a reply. If you get, every once in a while, there's a screw up. I'll be honest. I mean, sometimes, you know, there's a misprint or something, we don't catch it, you know, and we'll replace the mat, right? You know, our customers, we try to pride, that's one thing that we think really differentiates between our competition. You know, we want to have the best products, you know, at the best value and provide the best customer service. We also want to be involved in the community. You know, I mean, we donate mats to organizations, to groups having events, right? You know, we like to sponsor things. We like to be at conventions. We're gamers ourselves, you know, so I think the community is very important for us. We're just not trying to sell a mat to somebody, right? You know, we want to kind of, I mean, let's meet up and roll some dice around the table, right? So we're big on the community. I'd say that would be we don't have a mission statement, but I'd say that'd be our mission statement.
No, perfect. I completely agree. It's the first time I've said it in this episode. I normally say it a lot. I just think it's superb. I think especially we know the dollar moves everything, you know, the won, the pound, whatever you want to say. And anybody, you know, when I was even branching out and getting my own collections and stuff like that, like for anybody that's wanting to add that pizzazz to the table, I just think you can't be beat. I say money motivates, you know, what you do in the hobby. And there's some passion projects where you'll pay out the nose through that precious unit or whatever the case may be. But just the utility you can get from your mats, you know, I really haven't seen a peer get that much. And trust me, I'm out there in the wargaming community. Like I'll shop around, I'll buy different things, but you know, that's what it means to me. And I've heard people, you know, we were talking about roads earlier, like, oh, I don't want this mat with road. But like you said, with your mat being the 6x4 plus, you can just put things under it, a few little, you know, changes here and there, and you've got, you know, your brain is the only limiting factor if you're the player of this game on how you can limit it and how you can maximize the potential of cigar backs, battle mats. And then your mats that tie into each other with the one with the beach where you have the land right next to it and you can hook into them. I just think you guys are, you know, in my mind, one of the hobby leaders of how you're doing it well. And it's pretty awesome that it's just two guys, one in Nashville, one in Atlanta. Just, hey, we like to do this. You know, if you guys like what we're doing, pick up a mat on the site. I definitely tell the listeners right now, if you do not have one in your collection, you will not regret it buying one. And I guarantee you, by the time you have one in your cart, you're about to have three more down the line. So definitely look at Cigar Box and pick those up. I'll switch it. I think this will be our kind of final topic, and I'll push it back to Windhurst to go into that.
Yeah, so what can you tell us about the future of Cigar Box Battles? Any new products coming out, new directions, any hints you can give us about new releases coming up this year or next year?
Mats that hang on a wall. You have to play on a wall.
So no new
mats.
products, but we definitely have new designs coming. I can say this is we're going to have a holiday sale this holiday. This is be the first time I break this news. So probably we'll look for something like a Black Friday through the end of the year sale.
I'm buying that Gettysburg mat.
Yeah, that'll be good. we have a lot of new mats coming. Look for some more historical scenarios. Again, those aren't our best sellers, but they can be used for, like the Trenton mat. We came out with that, and it's really designed for 15 millimeter, AWI, right? But I've seen guys use it for Eastern Front, and, I mean, it's just a snow mat essentially with some water on it, right? So we've got, we're probably going to do just a little hint, another Napoleonic scenario that might involve something in Russia. Okay, so just kind of throw that out there.
Borodino. Okay, yeah. Roger that.
I'll just throw that out there. We get a lot of requests for Napoleonic mats. So we're probably going to do same thing, more Civil War, more AWI. So look for that. Generic mats, we have quite a bit covered. But I think you're going to see more sci-fi. I think you're going to see more some things that might cater to like fantasy or even some more like city urban kind of mats. I can kind of put that out there, but we definitely have a lot of new. We always try to stay, we probably have 8 mats already kind of in the hopper that we haven't released yet. We always try to stay a little bit ahead, kind of planning for the next season, so to speak, right? So we think kind of quarterly with our releases. So, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, what are we going to release? So we're already, planning kind of for Q1. We've got mats for that. So just, the best way is just follow us on, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. We try to kind of, be active there and kind of post what's coming. So, that's the easiest place to follow us. We do have a website. We don't update that much. An interesting story, a lot of, the name Cigar Box, the older gamers will get it. So when I was a kid, I could get free cigar boxes at the local smoke shop. And that's what I put my miniatures in, right? So now I think they charge for cigar boxes. I still have a lot of figures in cigar boxes. I'm looking at a lot over here in my office. But that was the name. And I had a blog. It was called Cigar Box Heroes, right? And then when me and Chris were talking, we're like, well, what do you want to call the company? If we do mats, well, let's just kind of associate it with your blog. So we called it Cigar Box Battles. But I don't post a lot on the blog anymore. Blogging was kind of a thing in the 90s. Now it's more social media, in my opinion. But it still exists, and I'll post some things on there from time to time. But that's kind of how we ended up with the name box. And because I used to store my miniatures in cigar boxes, and that was the easy way to transport them. And they were free. Like I said, you could just literally pick them up outside. The store would set them on the curb outside. So as a kid, free was good, right? So so anyway, that's a little bit about the name itself. Yeah.
No, I apologize. I didn't even ask that. I've known you now for a while, Cory, and I it's always gone back to it. I know you've said that maybe in other interviews, but it's a great kind of homage to the past of wargaming and where you came from as well. And now that, hopefully that 40K mat gamer who buys the futuristic terrain is going to be like, Cigar Box, what's this all about? And then, they see, oh, Gettysburg, Waterloo. And then they start, maybe they buy an Epic Army or they buy a Old Glory Army or something. And then they're into the historical side of it. Awesome interview. Cory, I can't thank you enough for being here. We're going to transition to our last 2 segments, just basing on time. And then we don't want to bore you to death. But the segment that we talked a little bit before we came on air was our kit bag. And so kicking it to you, we've always told the listener, the viewer, hey, this is in our kit bag, people give us recommendations of what needs to go in our kit bag for the hobbying. And I'll turn it over to you, Cory. What is in your Cigar Box haversack that's going to be in there that you enjoy, you like, and helps elevate your hobby?
Well, so that's something that's not Cigar Box related, just gaming related. I bring up 2 things. One would be MDF. So I have a friend, Stephen Huckabee, Raven Banner Games. He does MDF bases. Check him out. He's a great competitor to Litco. Litco's great. I have nothing bad to say about Litco. But Stephen, he's a small business.
Super expensive.
Well, but he's a small business. He'll answer your email, your message, same day, and he'll definitely sell you bases a lot cheaper, right? And he'll custom do whatever you want. So again, Raven Banner Games, just reach out to him. He's also on eBay. But just having, what they say, having a friend in the diamond business, right? It's great having a friend in the MDF business. So, just getting whatever bases I want. And then, I talked a little bit earlier about, slap chop and contrast paints. I mean, running down to the local Games Workshop store, don't buy a lot of their product the way I used to, the miniatures, but I sure do buy their paints. And that's something I'm always going to have in my kit bag, right? Or contrast paints. But I'd say those 2 things right now, between just having great MDF bases from Raven Banner and I'm on my slap chop painting. I'm working on 30 Years War right now. That's our club's project, me and Titch White, and some other guys too, but we're the main two. That's our club project. But using those contrast paints, it's been a game changer for me.
Slap chop's an amazing method. Windhurst, I think you did like a video on it not too long ago, right?
Yeah, I've been using actually Armor Painter speed paints to paint the Epic Napoleonics, and it's just really helped speed up the process when I'm painting large numbers of figures. And I think they're really handy for using it in big batches. And then also talking about companies for MDF that especially MDF here in the UK, because that's where I'm stationed at. When I was here, the first assignment, and they're still here, and I use them a lot, is war bases. And the same thing, like that level of customer service and willing to help out. I reached out to them because I wanted very specific bases so that my crossbows from my Norman army would be, the rear rank would be offset from the front rank. And I just drew a picture and sent them. I was like, yeah, we can knock that up. How many do you want? And they made those for me. And so, being able to have a company like that has been really good, and they're really well priced. So I definitely recommend, finding a good MDF company like that that's local to you.
Awesome.
Yeah, listeners, viewers, go to Raven Banner Games. I've seen him at a few shows. It is awesome stuff. He does a lot of cool stuff. And unfortunately, I do have a lot of stuff by Litco. And when you spend money on different things, it just means less money for miniatures and stuff like that. So I'm always looking to pinch pennies if I can. My only shade out of that segment with our kit bag is, Citadel is normally a gold standard to some degree, I think, in paint. Like, they do have great paints. Some of their technique paints, the base paints, are just awesome. And contrast has just made it so much easier. And there's ways to cheat with contrast where you can highlight over top. I do that a lot. And, you can blend it in to where you don't just think you have this contrast army. And to this day, every time I go to a hobby store, every 40K army, or a majority of them and everything else, is still gray. So I don't know what you're doing, Citadel, help your guys. I don't know if you need to come up with a painting service, GW, just help those people out, maybe. But we'll transition to our last segment of the episode. I'll kick it to Windhurst so he can be the alibi. We'll go to you, Cory, and then I'll close this out with what's on the scouting report. Windhurst, take us away.
Yeah, so still working through this huge lot of Epic Napoleonics. Got a whole bunch of them to work on and knock out. I'm almost finished, I think, with the first division of the first corps. So that'll be nice. And then working on some little small projects, but I'm kind of mostly in the mindset of within the next 6 to 8 months I'm going to be PCSing back to the States, and so that just kind of weighs on my mind about how I'm going to pack all of these things up and transport them across the world to who knows where. And so that kind of keeps me from feeling motivated to work on any large projects, just because I'm anxious about how I'm going to get them wherever they're going to go. It's also my kid's term break this week, and my wife had to go out of town, and I've got the whole week off, so we're going to get some gaming in, get some painting in together. So boys week, I'll have some photos and stuff up from that. And I think once I knock out these Napoleonics, we'll see. Some other small projects, if I have time, might either go back to my French Indian War or my World War I stuff.
So on my painting table right now, my gaming room are 28 millimeter 30 Years War. That's our project for the year. We like to do one club project every year. We think that's kind of fun, right? So I've been painting a lot of 30 Years War. So I'm doing Imperialists. My friend Titch is doing the Swedes. We're actually building Breitenfeld. We're using the order of battle actually from the book that Warlord Games put out for the 30 Years War. I forget the title of it at the moment, but
To Kill a King or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's the ECW one. This one, actually, I think I have it right here. Hold on. The Devil's Playground.
Oh, the Devil's Playground. Okay.
Yeah, so the Devil's Playground right here. We're doing the scenario from there. So that's what we're working on. I'm working on a lot of terrain for that, 3D buildings, roads. I've also got some 25 millimeter 1914 Belgians on there. So we're doing World War I. We're doing 1914, right? So early war Germans, French. I'm doing Belgians and Germans. Titch is doing British and French, so for 1914. So it's just kind of fun, you know. That's I've also got some you know, a few fantasy figures, not a lot, but I've been kind of doing this nostalgia retro thing where I've been painting up some old Raoul Partha and Grenadier figures that I come across at flea markets and things like that. Figures I probably couldn't afford, have afforded back when I was a kid, but I can afford them now. So I'm just buying them up, at conventions and painting them. So that's probably what I'm working on. If you can see over my shoulder here, that's
awesome.
That's part of the 30 Years War setup right there.
That's awesome.
There's some of the figures over there, and then anyway, you can kind of see the table. So
gaming room.
Yeah,
the Mecca.
Well, I'm looking at Matt's helmet collection behind him. That's very cool too.
Yeah. So the Afghanistan helmet. I like to pick up helmets, get full suits of armor and stuff when I finally get my forever home and get out of the army. But that is the actual helmet I wore in Afghanistan. So you had to turn it in, and after all the firefights and everything else, I just went to a army surplus store and I was like, my grandfather gave me some things from World War II, and it just like his infantry combat action badge and stuff, like, or combat CIB. And so I was just like, man, I want to keep as much of this stuff as I can. And I just swapped them out when I turned it into CIF, and I kept my one. Indiana Jones that, and they never knew the difference. So it worked out. It was I'm sure my daughters will throw that away when I'm gone, but hopefully it stays in the family. That's awesome on the scouting report. I'm glad, like, me and Windhurst go back and through, like, are you a wargamer? Are you a hobbyist? Are you a historian? Like, what do you do? And I think based off our discussions and with Windhurst, we go to all three. One will take primary for a little bit. Like, you might get in a painting rut, and then you're like, I'm going to go watch a movie or read this book or the old Osprey books. And then that'll get your juices flowing. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to play, or I'm going to get this battle set up. So it sounds like you've done the same thing with some the Raoul Partha kind of distractions in there as well, which is good. I think for my scouting report, what's in the foxhole and out on the horizon. So I'm getting the twilight of that Punic project. One of my friends bought an Imperial Roman army, and so I had to just go after the Gauls. I hate painting Gauls and Confederates because they're so eclectic, but that's a good thing about them. You can hide colors and do different things, and so I'm almost to the tail end of the Gauls. I'm about 3/4 of the way, maybe 65% of the way done with the army, and then we'll start gaming with those a little bit more. With Bolt Action V3, running demos, doing things like that. Still the game I love. A few growing pains with it. Again, I'm a fanboy for Bolt Action, but I will be objective when I can, and so we're learning through that as a group. We're getting everything together there, so it's really great. Me and Windhurst, and maybe a foreshadowing of what we're doing next. We had talked about rule sets and what we kind of wanted to play. And I grew up on Legends. I grew up on Steve Kelly's Desperado and playing that Historicon every year, and then played Legends of the Old West. CW actually doing the right thing, and in historical wargame, we played campaigns of those, and I was just, man, this is so easy. And some of the skirmish gaming and getting people into it, or seeing things I can play with kind of family. And I was like, I'm going to crack those books out. And there's been so many, maybe a handful of Wild West rule sets that have come out in the last decade. So Dead Man's Hand and those. And so behind me is a building Western town back there that is from both Great Escape Games and Knuckle Duster. And so I blame Tombstone, as every person should. You just throw that movie on, you haven't seen it in a few years, and you hear "I'll Be Your Huckleberry," or when Wyatt Earp's on the train at the train station saying, "You tell Johnny, hell's coming with me," and you're just like, all right, I'm hooked. Painting 6 models. So I think that as a foreshadowing of what we're gonna do. It started with what Windhurst, like, let's just buy the rule set. We already have the models. And then as every war gamer does, I sent Windhurst a picture of, I just bought several $100s of MDF and plastic building. Yeah. So I look forward to me and Windhurst gaming that, and having the same, like you said, Cory, and this is a callback again to those moments. Like, the games are fun, having the painted armies are great and everything, but the camaraderie you get and the banter you get at a table is like most of the reason why wargamers do it. And those memories of, who cares so much about the dice roll rather than the person's reaction or the fantastical story where, the skirmish infantry will beat the heavy regular elites or whatever the case may be. Those are hilarious. I really look forward to kind of getting back to the Desperado stories that I remember growing up as a kid and having with my old man and at conventions as well. So those are our scouting reports. Any kind of last word, Windhurst, and we'll give it to Cory for a last word as well, and then we'll bounce out.
Cory, I just want to thank you for coming on and talking with us. I know Kentuckian knows a lot about you. I actually didn't have any of your mats. I just know I was playing on a bunch, and then when Kentuckian told me we were going to interview you, I immediately went out and bought.
I changed that, Cory. I said you need to have one ASAP.
Yeah, so I've got it, and that's actually what the boys I've got set up downstairs, and the boys are going to be playing on it this week for our game week. But it's always good to talk to somebody in the industry and learn more about the different businesses that support this hobby that we love so much. And so, again, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chat with us.
Awesome. Well,
Cory, any last thoughts?
Yeah, it's always great to talk to gamers, right? Kindred spirit, and I said Kentuckian. I see you at NashCon at least once a year. Hope to see you more, right? And then just again, thanks for having me on. It was a great time. Always a great conversation. I mean, we could talk for hours, right? Especially we had a few beers in front of us, right?
Yeah,
definitely keep going, and but definitely love what you guys are doing. Love the podcast. I always look forward, to checking out the Fightin Kentuckian Facebook page to see what you're working on. Your ancient projects looks awesome. Your biblical project. You've got so many projects going right now, and I'm impressed with how many figures you're able to crank out, right? So I know and being a father, I know that's a lot of late night and early mornings, right? You got to kind of carve that time out. I know I used to get up at 4 a.m. so I could get some painting in before I went off to work before the kids got up, right? So you got to do what you got to do, but always look forward to what you guys are up to. Definitely hope to see you at some conventions out there, or see you out on the web space. I do have a YouTube channel where I post some of my personal stuff. It's actually called The Dice Keep. And awesome. It's just simple stuff where I post pictures and videos of things I'm working on outside of Cigar Box. I mean, it's obviously they're on Cigar Box Mats, but so if you want to see what I'm painting, you want to see what I'm gaming, definitely check out The Dice Keep on YouTube. Not a big channel. I think I've got 200 followers, and they're all probably personal friends of mine, but everybody's welcome to check it out. So
awesome.
Thanks.
That's awesome. As you know, being a father and a wargamer, it's a rough road. I'm about to go into lose my time. I think what I'm going to add into the chores period is base coating. If I can teach my daughters to base coat, okay, you don't have to clean your room if you can base coat these 400 French Voltigeurs or something. So I'll work that in, see if that gets on there.
There was a time when my kids were little where I tried to kind of trick them. I was like, let me teach you how to paint horses, right? If you can, we'll spray them. You guys love horses. You can paint all these horses for me. It didn't work. I mean, they painted a couple horses, but I was like,
they were pink or something. They were blue.
Yeah. If they could have just painted all these 200 horses for me. I've got to paint about 100 30 years war, heavy calves. Ooh. So be nice to have a horse painter, but I guess I'll do it for myself.
Yeah. But no, just can't. I'll close this out here. Can't thank you enough, Cory, for being on here. If you're at a show in the Southeast, please give Cory's store a look. Cigar Box Battle. I'm telling you right now, whatever you game, if you're a tabletop wargamer, you are missing out if you don't have one of these mats in your collection. And if you're like me and price moves you, the abilities that what you can make things with those mats on the battlescape. I know neoprene is huge with 40K. I know all these other things are huge. I'm telling you, take a look. Look at some of his futuristic maps, his urban battle mats. It'll bring your table to life. You can mix around with it. Huge kudos to Cory and his company and what they're doing, the passion that he has behind it at the start. It's been awesome to have him as a guest. We really appreciate the viewers, the listeners that are on here. Again, our whole goal is to spread the hobby. Me and Windhurst came up with this crazy idea, and we normally talk mindlessly, and we were like, well, let's see if somebody would be interested in listening to us. Keep us posted on your projects. Post online on our Facebook group, On Patrol Podcast, the group. So we love seeing other people's works. What you think about mats. Show us your pictures of Cigar Box Mats and what you've been able to create and do with it. I look forward to that. I'm sure Cory will as well. because there's a lot of more talented people out there than myself, Windhurst, and probably Cory on what they can do with terrain. So show us on there as well. Post us pictures. Things that you'd like to see on here, please share ideas and people you'd want us to talk to. We're privileged to talk to Cory today, but we're always looking for the next guest, the next war game, the next rule set, the next banter that we can have across the table. Again, thank you guys. Truly appreciate it. Be sure to grab your spear, your shield, your sword, your musket, or your belt-fed machine gun, and join us on the next On Patrol. Fightin Kentuckian out. I am a super fanboy of Cigar Box Battle.
That's good.
Like, super fan. I don't like. Yeah, I just think it's amazing.